Hey friends and book lovers, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be my December wrap-up, and I'll be talking about all the books and some graphic novels that I read in December. And I am so excited because December ended up being an amazing reading month for me. I read a lot more than I thought I would have time for. Just because of work wrapping up and the holidays, I wasn't sure how much time I could dedicate to reading, but I was able to get a ton knocked out, and even some of the reads that I had scheduled for January were knocked out in December, so that was really amazing. This month I also discovered my favorite book of the year for 2020, so look out for that video coming soon. And I discovered a new graphic novel series that I'm really enjoying and that is really cute. So let's dive right in. The first series or book or graphic novel that I want to talk about is called Fence, and I ended up reading volumes 1 through 4 in December. I breezed right through this. It was so cute. It's about this fencing academy, high school, and this underdog who joins the school and tries to find his place there. And it's definitely geared towards younger readers since it's set in a high school setting. But I just thought it was so cute and it's so relatable, and there's all these really cute romances and rivalries and support systems that I just feel, even as an adult reader, I found so relatable, and I really enjoyed this one. And I've heard it talked about a little bit on BookTube, but not a whole lot. I discovered it from another channel and then got quickly obsessed with it, which doesn't happen often with me when it comes to graphic novels. But this one I absolutely loved, and I can't wait till the next volume comes out because it's just so cute. It's so enjoyable, and I loved it. The next book I read on audio, and that was Echotar, which is the first in the series by Nnedi Okorafor. Now, I really enjoyed the book, but I discovered that it's really hard for me to read fiction novels on audio. I think audio for me is going to be reserved for nonfiction and self-help books because it is really hard to get into a fiction book for me on audio. I know some people really love it, but I just find it so hard. And even though I wish I picked this one up as a physical book or at least an ebook, I still did enjoy the audiobook, though it took me a little longer to get through because I don't always have a chance to turn on an audiobook when I'm home. And if I have a chance to read, I usually read a physical book or an ebook. And this series is a YA fantasy series. It's about a girl who discovers that she has these magical powers and she thinks that they're one-offs. Usually in this world, you get powers from your ancestral line, but she seems to be what they call a free agent, someone who manifests powers without having them in their ancestral line. And through this magical community, she meets other kids and other teens with her same powers, but they of course have ancestral bloodlines. And this is based in Nigeria, and it gives you that setting. And there are also African American characters that do bring in the more American view as well. So overall, it was pretty interesting to read. The magical world is also really interesting. There's a really interesting way of rewarding learning about magic the right way, and a really interesting way of punishing when you have taken the magic system too far. And there's also an interesting family dynamic with the main character and her family, which I think is rooted more deeply in African culture. I want to say it's almost like a coming of age story for the main character. And I don't think I've mentioned this, but our main character is female, so we get to see it from her point of view. And we also kind of get to see her discovering her roots a little bit more thoroughly. I found the novel to be fairly fast-paced, and there's a lot of different scenes that show you the different activities in the magical community, and also a little bit about how like the normal world works, but not as much there because of course we all know how that works since we live in it, unfortunately. I would much rather live in her magical community, but here we are. Overall, it was a really good read. The writing was great. It was fast-paced, it got things going, and the end was definitely explosive. So this is a series. I think it's supposed to be a trilogy, but only 2 from this trilogy have been so far released. I am tempted to pick up the second one, which I think is called Echotar Warrior, but we will see since I have a lot on my plate for 2021. If you guys have read this series or read the second one in the series, let me know down below if you think I should check it out ASAP, because the more folks tell me that I should, the higher I think it'll go on my list. So the next one I want to mention is another YA, and this one's a novella, and it's How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories. Now this is very, very, very young. I would say this is even more middle grade than the Cruel Prince series was, but it was a cute novella, and the illustrations inside of it are really, really beautiful. And so overall, even just for the artwork, I would say this is definitely a beautiful book. But if you're looking for a really compelling story and book, this is probably not it unless you love the Cruel Prince series and you just need to go back into the world. I personally could have probably done without this, but it's more of like a collector's item for me because I do find it really beautiful and I do love the art style. Rowena Kai is the artist, and I have seen her prints since the beginning of my book obsession, and I just find her to be a beautiful artist. And since I didn't mention this at first, of course, this and the entire Cruel Prince series is written by Holly Black. The next one, I'm not like super proud to admit that I'm reading this series, but I'm gonna go ahead and confess my sins here, and that is Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin. Now this is the sequel to Serpent and Dove, and I didn't love Serpent and Dove that much. It's actually the honorable mention in my worst books of 2020, but I was hoping to get a different perspective and a different character's viewpoint in this novel, which is why I ended up buying it. We do get to learn more about that character that I mentioned that I wanted to learn more about, and that character is Coco. She has this Dame Rouge blood magic in her line, and I was hoping this book would be more centered around her and her magic and her background story, but it wasn't. It was a continuation of the first book, which I feel like I should have known that. That was obvious, but I was really thinking that the way this book sounded, they would be installments of a series from different perspectives, but that was not the case. This was better than the first one. The first one I found to be really ridiculous to be believable, and those ridiculous moments would tend to pull me out of the story, which was really distracting. This one was better, but it was still kind of hard to get through. There was a lot of slow moving parts, and the only real action happened in the last 80 to 100 pages. If someone asked me if I would recommend this series to a young adult reader, I'd probably say no from my taste because I really didn't enjoy it that much, but there's a lot of hype about this series on BookTube, so maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about, but I just didn't find it to be that great. The next one I want to talk about is one that I really enjoyed, and I haven't heard this talked about on BookTube at all. I don't think I know anyone that's read this book on BookTube. I do know some bookstagrammers that have read it and have raved about it, but I personally have not heard it on BookTube. And that is The Space Between the Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. Now this is a debut novel for Micaiah Johnson. It's on the new adult side, I think. The themes here are pretty dark, so I don't think it's a YA. I would say it's stronger for the new adult genre. And honestly, this is one of my favorite books of the year. The premise sounds amazing. The story was so well crafted. You were hooked. I think the first 20-40 pages I was hooked, and from then on there was just thing after thing after thing. It wasn't so action-packed that you got bogged down by all the action, but it was intriguing, there was mystery, there was thrill. It's a standalone sci-fi book as well, and so everything about it was just so beautifully written. I gave this one 5 stars. This is the UK version. It's absolutely stunning. The US version is also stunning, but this one is definitely superior. I want everyone to read this. If you enjoy adult fantasy and you enjoy adult sci-fi, you'll definitely really enjoy this new adult novel. It's so good, and the premise is nothing like I've ever read before. So this is about a girl named Kara who lives in this world that has multiverses, and her world has discovered how to travel between the different multiverses, but the catch is you can only travel in the multiverse if your doppelganger has died in that world, and she has died in all worlds except for 8 of them, and there are 380 of them in total. What ends up happening is that one of her living doppelgangers ends up dying in one of these worlds, and she goes and investigates, and so you kind of follow her journey of discovering all these things and rediscovering all these people and relationships in this book. And oh my god, it's so good. It's definitely one of my favorites. I can't wait to release my favorites video because I can't wait to just gush about this more, but it's so good, and I hope that you all get your hands on it. If you have read this book, please let me know in the comments down below because I definitely want to hear what you thought of it. The last few books that I read in December, I read all over the holiday week, and that was the echotar series. I read the entire trilogy plus A Court of Frost and Starlight all within a week, and I just loved binging it. Now this is more of an adult fantasy. I think it's more new adult because it does start out very young sounding, and then it does get very adult themed. And if you've read Sarah J. Maas, then you definitely know what I mean when I say adult themed. She definitely goes there in her novels, and this is a fantasy romance. Her other series, Throne of Glass, which is a YA, does incorporate romance, but is very much more about the storyline. I find echotar to be way more fantasy romance than it is a fantasy adventure novel. It is very centered around the romances and relationships that take place in the world. Even still, I found that I really enjoyed it and it really sucked me in. So I don't know if I'm just trash for stuff like that and I had no idea that I enjoyed romance and fantasy that much, but apparently I really do. And I honestly cannot wait for A Court of Silver Flames to come out in February because I will be reading it as soon as I get it. I feel like it's going to be such an interesting novel, especially the way the novella left us off. Makes me really confused as to what's going to happen in this next novel, and that is going to be based on Cassian and Nesta's relationship because Cassian happens to be one of my favorite characters in this series. I just find him hilarious and I can't wait to see what happens next with the Nesta. But I know a lot of people aren't fans of Nesta, so people aren't really excited for this one to come out, but I'm here for it. I am so stoked. So those are the books that I read in December. Overall, it was a really successful month and I was really happy on how it turned out. I ended up enjoying so many of these reads and it was such a good month for 4- and 5-star reads for me. If you like this video, please go ahead and click the like button below. And if you like my content and want to watch more, please go ahead and subscribe down below. Thank you.